Captain Marcus Phantom Reeves had been officially dead for 15 years, but nobody told the classified aircraft currently streaking across Nevada airspace at twice the speed of sound. The man who vanished without a trace during a routine training mission in 2009 was now piloting the most advanced stealth fighter in the United States arsenal, and the only people who knew he was alive worked in buildings that didn't appear on any government organizational chart. The morning of March 15th, 2024, began like any other day at Nellis Air Force Base, with maintenance crews performing routine inspections on conventional aircraft and pilots preparing for standard training exercises in the crystal-clear Nevada desert sky. The air traffic controllers in the tower were tracking scheduled flights, monitoring weather patterns, and coordinating with civilian aviation authorities about routine military operations in restricted airspace. Nobody expected to see an aircraft that wasn't supposed to exist, piloted by someone who wasn't supposed to be breathing. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Chen was working her usual shift in the control tower, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "World's okayest air traffic controller," and monitoring the radar displays that showed the familiar patterns of training aircraft conducting routine maneuvers. The morning had been predictably quiet, with only 3 F-16s conducting formation practice and a cargo transport, making its weekly supply run to the remote testing facility in Sector 7. The restricted airspace was clear except for authorized military traffic, and the weather conditions were perfect for flying. At exactly 11:47 a.m., something appeared on Chen's radar screen that made her coffee mug freeze halfway to her lips. The signature was unlike anything she'd seen in 12 years of air traffic control work. The aircraft was moving at incredible speed, but its radar cross-section was almost non-existent, appearing and disappearing like a ghost on her display. The flight path showed it had originated from somewhere deep in the Nevada desert, but there were no scheduled departures from any of the classified facilities in that area. Tower, this is Raven 1 requesting immediate priority landing clearance, came a voice over the radio that sent chills down Chen's spine. The call sign wasn't in any of the standard military aviation databases, and the voice belonged to someone who spoke with the calm authority of a pilot who'd flown in situations where hesitation meant death. But there was something else about that voice, something that triggered a memory Chen couldn't quite place. "Raven 1, identify yourself and state your point of origin," Chen responded, following standard protocol while trying to process what she was seeing on her radar. The aircraft's signature suggested stealth technology far beyond anything she'd been briefed on, and the flight characteristics indicated capabilities that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Whatever this aircraft was, it represented technology that was decades ahead of conventional military aviation. Tower, Raven 1 is declaring an emergency. I have critical intel that requires immediate debriefing with Colonel Sarah Martinez in Building 47. Request immediate clearance for runway 23 left and ground escort to secure facility. The pilot's voice remained steady, but Chen could hear something in the background that sounded like warning alarms and the distinctive whine of advanced engine systems operating at maximum capacity. Chen glanced at her supervisor, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the conversation with growing concern. Building 47 was a facility that existed in a gray area between official military installations and places that appeared on no public records. Colonel Martinez was a name that appeared in classified briefings, but never in standard military directories. The combination of the mysterious aircraft, the unknown call sign, and the reference to classified personnel created a situation that was far beyond normal air traffic control procedures. Raven 1, we show no flight plan for your call sign and no record of your aircraft type in our system. We need verification of your authorization before we can grant landing clearance. Rodriguez had taken over the radio communication, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd dealt with classified situations before. But even he seemed uncertain about the proper protocol for this scenario. Tower, my authorization code is Delta-7-Charlie-November-Tango. Verify with Northcom Special Access Programs. I'm coming in whether you clear me or not, but it would be easier for everyone if you just cleared the runway. The pilot's voice carried a note of urgency that suggested this wasn't a request so much as a notification of what was about to happen regardless of air traffic control approval. Rodriguez quickly accessed the classified communication system and input the authorization code. The response came back within seconds, and his face went pale as he read the clearance level and operational priority. The code was legitimate, carrying authority that superseded local base command and came directly from the highest levels of military intelligence. Whatever was happening, it was significant enough to activate protocols that most air traffic controllers never encountered in their entire careers. Raven 1, you are cleared for immediate landing on runway 23 left. All other aircraft are being diverted to alternate runways. Emergency vehicles are standing by, and ground security will escort you to the designated facility. Rodriguez's voice had taken on the professional calm that military personnel used when dealing with situations that were simultaneously routine and extraordinary. Chen watched her radar display as the mysterious aircraft adjusted its approach vector with precision that spoke of exceptional pilot skill. The landing pattern was textbook perfect, but executed with the kind of subtle adjustments that indicated someone with thousands of hours of experience in high-performance aircraft. Whoever was flying that plane knew exactly what they were doing, and they were doing it with a level of competence that impressed even veteran air traffic controllers. The aircraft touched down so smoothly that it seemed to simply materialize on the runway rather than land in any conventional sense. The stealth technology that made it nearly invisible to radar also made it incredibly quiet, creating an almost ghostly presence as it rolled down the runway and turned toward the secure taxiway that led to Building 47. Chen had never seen anything like it, and she'd been controlling air traffic at one of the most advanced military installations in the world for over a decade. As the mysterious aircraft taxied toward its destination, Chen found herself thinking about a story she'd heard years ago during a late-night conversation in the air traffic control break room. An older controller had mentioned a pilot who disappeared during a classified mission in 2009. Someone who'd been so skilled that other pilots called him Phantom because of his ability to appear and disappear without warning. The official report had listed him as killed in action during a training accident, but there had always been rumors among the aviation community that the circumstances of his disappearance were more complex than anyone was allowed to discuss. Captain Marcus Reeves had been one of the Air Force's most promising test pilots before his disappearance, someone who'd been involved in evaluating experimental aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in military aviation. His personnel file had been classified at levels that most people didn't have clearance to access, and the details of his final mission had been sealed under national security protocols that would remain in effect for decades. But pilots talked, and stories had a way of surviving even when official records were buried under layers of classification. The rumors suggested that Marcus hadn't died in a training accident, but had been recruited for a program so classified that it required him to disappear completely from all official records. The program was said to involve testing aircraft that were decades ahead of anything the public knew existed, flying missions that took place in the spaces between official military operations, where pilots operated without backup or support. It was the kind of assignment that attracted people who thrived on impossible challenges and were willing to sacrifice everything, including their own identity, for the mission. Chen had dismissed those stories as the kind of legends that grew up around military aviation, the sort of tales that pilots told to add mystery and excitement to their profession. But watching the ghostly aircraft taxi toward Building 47, she began to wonder if some legends might be based on truth. The pilot of Raven 1 had spoken with the kind of authority that came from years of operating in classified environments, and the aircraft itself represented technology that seemed to confirm the existence of programs that operated far beyond public knowledge. The secure taxiway leading to Building 47 was lined with armed guards, who'd appeared within minutes of the aircraft's landing, creating a corridor of security that prevented anyone without proper clearance from getting close to the mysterious plane. The building itself was a nondescript concrete structure that could have been a warehouse or storage facility, but Chen knew it contained some of the most advanced briefing rooms and secure communication systems in the military. Whatever was about to happen inside that building would have implications that reached far beyond Nellis Air Force Base. As the aircraft disappeared behind the security perimeter, Chen found herself staring at her radar screen and trying to process what she'd just witnessed. The morning had started as a routine shift controlling conventional military training flights, but it had ended with the arrival of an aircraft that shouldn't exist, piloted by someone who might have returned from the dead. The implications were staggering, and she knew that what she'd seen would be classified at levels that would prevent her from ever discussing it with anyone who didn't have the proper security clearance. The radio crackled with routine communications from other aircraft, but Chen barely heard them. Her mind was focused on the voice of the pilot who'd called himself Raven 1, and the growing certainty that she'd just witnessed something that would change everything she thought she knew about military aviation. The ghost pilot who disappeared 15 years ago had just landed the most advanced aircraft she'd ever seen, and the story of how that was possible was about to unfold in ways that would challenge everything the world believed about what was real and what was legend. Colonel Sarah Martinez had been expecting this moment for 15 years, but that didn't make it any less surreal when it finally arrived. She stood in the secure briefing room of Building 47, watching through reinforced windows as the most classified aircraft in the United States inventory rolled to a stop on the restricted tarmac. The morning had begun with routine intelligence briefings and administrative meetings, the kind of predictable schedule that defined life at a facility that officially didn't exist. But the encrypted message she'd received at 0800 hours had changed everything, triggering protocols that hadn't been activated since the program's inception. The message had been brief and coded, but its meaning was unmistakable to someone with Martinez's clearance level. Package delivery imminent. Phantom returning home. Prepare for priority alpha debriefing. Those 12 words represented the culmination of one of the most ambitious and dangerous operations in modern military history. The return of an asset who'd been operating in the deepest levels of classified space for over a decade. Martinez had helped design the program that sent Marcus Reeves into the shadows, and now she would be responsible for bringing him back into the light. Dr. James Harrison, the Chief of Aerospace Development for the Special Access Program, arrived at Building 47 within 30 minutes of the encrypted alert, his usually calm demeanor betraying signs of the excitement and anxiety that came with witnessing history in the making. Harrison had been one of the original architects of the Ghost Pilot program, the brilliant engineer who designed both the technology and the operational framework that allowed pilots like Marcus to operate beyond the boundaries of conventional military aviation. His hands shook slightly as he reviewed the technical specifications on his tablet, data that confirmed the successful completion of missions that most people would consider impossible. The aircraft performed flawlessly, Harrison murmured, more to himself than to Martinez, his eyes fixed on the sleek form of the experimental fighter that had just completed a journey from somewhere deep in hostile territory. 15 years of development, and it finally proves itself in actual combat conditions. The stealth systems, the propulsion technology, the integrated weapons platforms, everything exceeded our most optimistic projections. Martinez nodded, but her attention was focused on the human element rather than the technological achievement. Marcus Reeves had volunteered for a mission that required him to disappear from all official records, to operate for years without support or backup, flying aircraft that existed only in the most classified development programs. The psychological toll of such isolation was something that no amount of training could fully prepare someone for, and she wondered what kind of man would emerge from the cockpit after 15 years of operating in the spaces between official military operations. The secure communication system chimed with an incoming transmission from Northcom headquarters, confirming that the highest levels of military command were monitoring the situation in real time. General Patricia Williams, the four-star general who oversaw all special access programs, appeared on the encrypted video link with an expression that mixed relief and apprehension. The general had been a young colonel when the Ghost Pilot program was first proposed, and she'd carried the weight of responsibility for Marcus's mission throughout her rise to the highest levels of military leadership. "Sarah, what's the status on our returning asset?" General Williams asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made decisions that affected national security on a daily basis. "We've been monitoring the situation from here, but I need your assessment of his condition and the intelligence package he's carrying." "He's completed the approach and landing successfully, ma'am," Martinez replied, watching as security teams surrounded the experimental aircraft with the kind of precision that came from years of practicing procedures that most people hoped would never be necessary. "The aircraft appears undamaged, and his radio communications were clear and professional. We're preparing for immediate debriefing as soon as he completes the shutdown procedures." "Understood. Be aware that we have multiple intelligence agencies requesting immediate access to whatever information he's carrying. The situation in the regions where he's been operating has deteriorated significantly since his last scheduled communication. His intelligence could be critical to ongoing operations." General Williams paused, and Martinez could see the weight of command in her expression. "Also be aware that his psychological evaluation will be crucial. 15 years of deep cover. Operation is unprecedented. We need to know if he's still fit for continued service, or if extraction and retirement protocols need to be activated." The aircraft's engines wound down with a barely audible whine. The advanced propulsion systems designed to operate with minimal acoustic signature, even during ground operations. Marcus had been flying technology that wouldn't be revealed to the public for decades, if ever, operating in conditions that pushed both man and machine to their absolute limits. The fact that both he and the aircraft had returned intact spoke to a level of skill and dedication that few people possessed. Lieutenant Colonel David Park, the base security commander, coordinated the ground operations with military precision. That reflected years of experience in handling classified situations. His teams moved with practiced efficiency, establishing security perimeters and communication protocols that ensured complete operational security. Park had overseen the departure of Ghost pilots before, but this was his first experience with a successful return mission, and the significance of the moment wasn't lost on him. "All security teams report green," Park announced through the secure communication system. "Perimeter is secure, communication is isolated, and medical teams are standing by. The pilot appears to be in good physical condition based on visual assessment, but we're prepared for any contingency." Martinez appreciated Park's thoroughness, but she was more concerned with the emotional and psychological state of a man who'd been operating alone in hostile territory for 15 years. The Ghost Pilot program was designed to place exceptionally skilled pilots in situations where they could gather intelligence and conduct operations that were impossible through conventional military channels. But the human cost of such missions was something that kept her awake at night, wondering about the men and women who'd volunteered to disappear from the world in service of their country. The cockpit canopy opened with a soft hydraulic hiss, and for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Reeves was visible to people who knew his real name. Martinez watched through binoculars as he removed his helmet and ran a hand through hair. That was now more gray than the sandy brown she remembered from his original briefings. His movements were deliberate and controlled, showing no signs of injury or distress, but there was something in his posture that suggested the weight of years spent carrying secrets that could never be shared. Marcus climbed down from the aircraft with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that every movement might be his last, his eyes scanning the security perimeter with the automatic awareness that came from years of operating in environments where threats could emerge without warning. He carried a sealed briefcase that undoubtedly contained intelligence gathered during missions that officially never happened, information that could influence military and political decisions at the highest levels of government. The medical team conducted a rapid preliminary assessment, checking vital signs and looking for obvious injuries or signs of distress. Marcus submitted to their examination with patient cooperation, answering questions about his physical condition, while maintaining the kind of professional demeanor that suggested he was still fully capable of operational duties. His responses were clear and coherent, showing no signs of the psychological breakdown that might be expected after such an extended period of isolation. "Vital signs are normal," reported Dr. Lisa Thompson, the Chief Medical Officer for Special Operations Personnel. "No obvious physical injuries or signs of malnutrition. He appears to be in excellent physical condition, considering the duration and nature of his assignment. I'm recommending immediate psychological evaluation, but from a medical standpoint, he appears fit for debriefing." Martinez felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as she prepared to meet face-to-face with a man who'd become something of a legend within the classified community. Marcus Reeves had volunteered for a mission that required extraordinary sacrifice, giving up his identity, his relationships, and any hope of a normal life in order to serve his country in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. The fact that he'd returned successfully was a testament to both his skill as a pilot and his strength as a human being. The secure escort vehicle arrived to transport Marcus from the aircraft to the debriefing facility, a short journey that would mark his transition from ghost pilot back to official military personnel. Martinez knew that the next few hours would be crucial in determining whether Marcus could be successfully reintegrated into conventional military service or whether the years of isolation had changed him in ways that made such reintegration impossible. As the convoy moved toward Building 47, Martinez reviewed the classified files that documented Marcus's original mission, parameters, and the intelligence objectives that had required such an extreme operational approach. The world had changed significantly during his 15-year absence, and the information he carried could provide crucial insights into adversary capabilities and intentions that conventional intelligence gathering had been unable to penetrate. Briefing room had been prepared according to protocols developed specifically for returning ghost pilots, with communication systems that could handle the highest levels of classified information and psychological support staff trained in dealing with the unique challenges faced by personnel returning from extended deep cover operations. Martinez knew that the next phase of Marcus's story would be just as challenging as anything he'd faced during his years in the shadows, as he attempted to rejoin a world that had moved on without him while carrying secrets that could never be fully shared. The secure briefing room fell silent as Marcus Reeves entered, his footsteps echoing off the reinforced concrete walls with a hollow sound that seemed to emphasize the weight of 15 years spent in operational limbo. Colonel Martinez studied his face carefully, looking for signs of the psychological strain that intelligence analysts had predicted would be inevitable after such an extended period of isolation. But what she saw was something far more unsettling than breakdown or trauma. Marcus looked exactly like what he was, a weapon that had been honed to perfection in conditions that would destroy most people. "Colonel Martinez," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same calm authority she remembered from their final briefing in 2009, though there was something else underneath it now. A depth that came from experiences that couldn't be shared with people who lacked the proper security clearance. I have priority intelligence that requires immediate escalation to Northcom and CIA leadership. The situation has deteriorated beyond our worst-case projections. Martinez gestured toward the conference table where Dr. Harrison and Lieutenant Colonel Park were already seated, their faces reflecting the mixture of anticipation and apprehension that came with receiving intelligence from sources that operated beyond the reach of conventional military oversight. The room's advanced security systems had been activated, creating an electronic isolation that prevented any unauthorized monitoring of the conversation that was about to take place. "Before we begin the intelligence briefing," Martinez said carefully, "I need to conduct a preliminary psychological assessment. You've been operating alone for 15 years, Marcus. No backup, no extraction plan, no communication with home base except for emergency protocols. That kind of isolation changes people in ways that aren't always immediately apparent." Marcus set his briefcase on the table with deliberate precision, his movements controlled and purposeful in a way that suggested every action had been carefully considered. "Ma'am, with respect, the psychological evaluation can wait. What I've discovered in the field requires immediate action. Every hour we delay increases the risk to national security by orders of magnitude." Dr. Harrison leaned forward, his technical expertise making him eager to understand the operational details that had allowed Marcus to survive and thrive in conditions that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. The aircraft performed beyond all expectations, didn't it? The stealth systems, the range capabilities, the integrated intelligence gathering equipment. 15 years of development finally proved in actual combat conditions. "The technology saved my life more times than I can count," Marcus replied, but his attention remained focused on Martinez rather than the engineer who designed his tools. "But technology is only as good as the intelligence that guides its deployment. What I've learned changes everything we thought we knew about adversary capabilities and intentions." Martinez activated the room's most secure recording systems, protocols that would ensure the conversation was captured with the highest possible fidelity while maintaining security protocols that prevented unauthorized access. The intelligence that Marcus carried had been gathered at enormous personal cost, and it deserved to be preserved with the same care that had been invested in obtaining it. "Proceed with your briefing," Martinez said, settling into her chair with the expectation that what she was about to hear would reshape her understanding of global military threats. "But I want you to know that extraction and reintegration protocols are available if you need them. 15 years of deep cover operation is unprecedented. There's no shame in acknowledging that you've given enough." Marcus opened his briefcase and removed a series of data storage devices that represented the culmination of 15 years, spent gathering intelligence in places where conventional military operations were impossible. The devices contained information that had been obtained through methods that couldn't be discussed in official channels, using resources that existed only in the most classified development programs. 3 months ago, I infiltrated a facility that intelligence agencies believed was developing conventional aerospace technology. Marcus began, his voice taking on the clinical tone that intelligence officers used when describing operations that involved significant risk to human life. "What I discovered was a weapons development program that exceeds our current capabilities by decades. They're not just matching our technology anymore, they're surpassing it." Lieutenant Colonel Park shifted uncomfortably in his seat, recognizing the implications of what Marcus was describing. Advanced aerospace technology in the hands of adversaries represented a threat level that could fundamentally alter the global balance of power, making conventional military strategies obsolete and requiring completely new approaches to national defense. "Define surpassing," Dr. Harrison said, his scientific background making him demand precision in any discussion of technological capabilities. Are we talking about incremental improvements to existing systems, or are we looking at breakthrough technologies that represent paradigm shifts in aerospace engineering? Marcus pulled up holographic displays from one of his data devices, showing three-dimensional technical diagrams that made everyone in the room understand why his intelligence was classified at levels that most government officials would never access. The aircraft designs displayed capabilities that seemed to violate known principles of physics, propulsion systems that appeared to operate without conventional fuel sources, and weapons platforms could engage targets from distances that rendered traditional defensive systems useless. "This is footage from my reconnaissance missions," Marcus continued, activating video displays that showed aircraft performing maneuvers that shouldn't be possible, according to current understanding of aerodynamics and propulsion technology. These aren't prototypes or experimental designs. These are operational aircraft being produced in quantities that suggest they're preparing for large-scale military operations. Colonel Martinez felt her blood pressure rising as she processed the implications of what Marcus was showing them. The intelligence represented a threat assessment that would require immediate escalation to the highest levels of government, potentially triggering military responses that could escalate into global conflict. But the source of the intelligence was equally problematic, since Marcus's very existence was classified at levels that made official acknowledgement impossible. "How did you gather this intelligence without being detected?" Park asked, his security background making him focus on operational details that could inform future intelligence gathering efforts. "These facilities appear to have security measures that would make infiltration extremely difficult for conventional operatives. The Ghost pilot program was designed specifically for this type of mission," Marcus replied, displaying additional footage that showed him operating in conditions that would be impossible for conventional military personnel. "The aircraft's stealth capabilities allowed me to observe and document activities that satellite surveillance couldn't penetrate. But the cost of gathering this intelligence has been significant." Dr. Harrison studied the technical specifications with growing alarm, recognizing design principles that his own research team had only theorized about in the most advanced classified programs. "These propulsion systems appear to operate on principles that we've barely begun to understand. If they've achieved operational deployment of this technology, our entire strategic advantage has been neutralized." Marcus nodded grimly, confirming Harrison's worst fears while pulling up additional data that showed the scope and scale of adversary technological development. "They've been working on this for at least 2 decades, probably longer. What you're seeing represents the culmination of a long-term strategic program designed to achieve technological superiority in aerospace warfare." "What's your assessment of their timeline for operational deployment?" Martinez asked, knowing that the answer would determine whether they were dealing with a future threat or an immediate crisis that required emergency response protocols. "Are we looking at months, years, or decades before these capabilities become a direct threat to our operations?" "Ma'am, these capabilities are already operational," Marcus said quietly, his words hitting the room like a physical blow. "What I've shown you represents current deployment, not future development. They're not preparing for technological superiority. They've already achieved it." The silence that followed was filled with the weight of implications that nobody in the room wanted to acknowledge. The United States military had built its strategic planning around the assumption of technological superiority, the belief that American aerospace technology was advanced enough to maintain decisive advantages over any potential adversary. Marcus's intelligence suggested that assumption was not only wrong, but dangerously outdated. "There's more," Marcus continued, accessing additional files that showed even more disturbing information. "During my final reconnaissance mission, I discovered evidence of technology transfer programs that suggest they're sharing these capabilities with allied nations. We're not just facing one adversary with advanced technology. We're potentially facing multiple adversaries with capabilities that exceed our own. Lieutenant Colonel Park leaned back in his chair, processing strategic implications that would require fundamental changes to military doctrine and operational planning. This changes everything about how we approach national defense. Our entire strategy has been based on technological advantage. If that advantage has been neutralized or reversed, we need to completely rethink our approach to military operations. Marcus activated a final data display that showed orbital tracking information, satellite imagery, and communication intercepts that painted a picture of adversary activities that extended far beyond terrestrial aerospace development. They're not just developing advanced aircraft. They're building space-based capabilities that could neutralize our satellite networks and communication systems. What we're looking at is a comprehensive program designed to achieve dominance across all domains of warfare. Dr. Harrison stared at the data with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been shattered. The implications for our defense industrial base are staggering. We would need to accelerate our own development programs by decades to achieve parity, and that assumes we can even reverse engineer the principles they're using. Which brings us to the operational question, Colonel Martinez said, recognizing that the intelligence briefing had moved beyond simple information sharing into strategic crisis management. What do you recommend as our response to this threat? Assessment? We can't ignore intelligence of this magnitude, but we also can't respond through conventional military channels without revealing sources and methods that are classified beyond normal security protocols. Marcus closed his briefcase and looked around the room at the faces of people who would have to make decisions based on intelligence that officially didn't exist, gathered by someone who was supposed to be dead. Ma'am, I recommend immediate escalation to the National Security Council with a recommendation for emergency acceleration of our own advanced aerospace programs. But I also recommend continued deep reconnaissance to gather additional intelligence about their operational timelines and strategic intentions. Are you volunteering to return to the field? Martinez asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Marcus Reeves had spent 15 years operating in conditions that would destroy most people, and he showed no signs of being ready to retire from the shadows. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied without hesitation. The mission isn't complete. What I've gathered is crucial intelligence, but it's not comprehensive enough to inform long-term strategic planning. They're moving faster than our intelligence community realizes, and we need someone in position to monitor their progress and report on any changes to their operational timeline. The room fell silent again as everyone processed the implications of what Marcus was proposing. Sending him back into the field would mean extending his isolation indefinitely, asking him to sacrifice even more years of his life for intelligence that might not be obtainable through any other means. But the alternative might be facing a strategic surprise that could fundamentally alter the global balance of power. Colonel Martinez looked at Marcus Reeves and saw something that both impressed and saddened her. Here was a man who had given everything for his country and was prepared to give even more, operating in the spaces between official military operations, where heroes were made and forgotten in equal measure. The ghost pilot had returned from the dead with intelligence that could save the nation, but the cost of that salvation would be measured in continued sacrifice by someone who had already given more than anyone should be asked to give. The weight of Marcus's intelligence hung in the air like a suffocating blanket as Colonel Martinez processed the magnitude of what she'd just learned. 15 years of careful strategic planning had just been rendered obsolete by the revelation that their most fundamental assumptions about technological superiority were not only wrong, but catastrophically outdated. She looked at Marcus Reeves and realized that the man sitting across from her represented both the solution to their intelligence crisis and the embodiment of an impossible choice that would define the next phase of American national security. Marcus, she said slowly, choosing her words with the precision that came from years of making decisions that affected lives and operations far beyond her immediate command. What you're proposing essentially means disappearing forever. The psychological evaluation protocols exist for a reason. 15 years of isolation and stress would break most people, and you're talking about extending that indefinitely. Marcus met her gaze with eyes that reflected experiences no training manual could prepare someone for. The calm certainty of someone who had already made peace with sacrifices that most people couldn't imagine. Ma'am, with respect, the psychological cost of continued operation is insignificant compared to the strategic cost of ignorance. What I've discovered represents an existential threat to national security. Someone needs to monitor their progress and report on operational developments. That could affect our response timeline. Dr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his engineering background making him focus on the technical implications of Marcus's proposal rather than the human cost. The aircraft systems can support extended operations, but we're talking about pushing both man and machine beyond their design specifications. The Ghost Pilot program was conceived as a short-term intelligence gathering operation, not a permanent exile. The program has evolved beyond its original parameters, Marcus replied, accessing additional files from his briefcase that contained operational data spanning his entire 15-year mission. The aircraft has been continuously upgraded through remote download protocols, and I've adapted to operational conditions that exceed anything we anticipated during initial planning. The mission parameters may have changed, but the capability to execute them has kept pace. Lieutenant Colonel Park leaned forward, his security expertise making him consider the broader implications of what Marcus was proposing. Even if you're physically and psychologically capable of continued operations, we need to consider the strategic risks of having our most valuable intelligence asset operating without backup or extraction protocols. What happens if you're compromised? What happens if the aircraft fails in hostile territory? Marcus activated a holographic display that showed detailed mission logs from his 15 years of operation, data that painted a picture of survival and adaptation in conditions that would have destroyed conventional military operations. I've been compromised before. I've survived equipment failures, hostile engagement, and situations where extraction wasn't possible. The operational security protocols I've developed exceed anything in the standard manual because they've been tested under actual combat conditions. Colonel Martinez studied the mission logs with growing amazement, recognizing that what Marcus had accomplished went far beyond simple intelligence gathering. He had become something unprecedented in military history, a one-man intelligence operation, capable of sustained operations in environments where conventional forces couldn't survive. But the human cost of such capability was something that kept her awake at night, wondering about the price paid by people who volunteered to disappear from the world. There's another factor to consider, Marcus continued, pulling up intelligence analysis that showed patterns in adversary development that conventional intelligence gathering had completely missed. The technological capabilities I've documented are advancing at an accelerated pace. Their development timeline suggests they're preparing for operations that could fundamentally alter the global balance of power. We need real-time intelligence about their progress, not periodic assessments that might miss critical developments. Dr. Harrison examined the technical progression data with the expression of someone whose worst fears were being confirmed by empirical evidence. The rate of advancement shown here suggests they've achieved breakthrough technologies that allow for rapid prototyping and deployment. Our own development cycles are measured in decades, while theirs appear to be measured in months or years. Which brings us back to the fundamental question, Martinez said, recognizing that the conversation had moved beyond simple mission planning into existential crisis management. Are you prepared to spend the rest of your life operating in hostile territory without any guarantee of extraction or reintegration? Because what you're describing isn't a mission with a defined endpoint. It's a permanent assignment to live and die in the shadows. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, and Martinez could see him processing memories and experiences that would never appear in any official record. When he opened them again, his expression carried the quiet certainty of someone who had already made peace with choices that would define the remainder of his existence. "Ma'am, I've been dead for 15 years according to official records. My family grieved for me, moved on with their lives, and found peace with my absence. The world continued without Marcus Reeves, and it will continue without him indefinitely. But the Ghost Pilot program represents a capability that our nation needs, regardless of the personal cost to the individuals who execute it." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what Marcus was saying. He wasn't just volunteering for an extended mission. He was accepting permanent exile from conventional existence in order to serve his country in ways that would never be officially acknowledged. The magnitude of such sacrifice was something that challenged fundamental assumptions about duty, service, and the prices people were willing to pay for national security. There are operational considerations beyond your personal willingness to continue, Park said, his voice carrying the weight of security concerns that extended far beyond individual sacrifice. Extended operations increase the risk of exposure, which could compromise not just your mission but the entire Ghost Pilot program. We need to consider whether the intelligence value justifies the operational risk. Marcus activated another data display that showed intelligence assessments comparing his reconnaissance findings with information gathered through conventional intelligence channels. The comparison was startling, revealing gaps in understanding that conventional methods had been unable to fill and threat assessments that were significantly more severe than anything previously documented. The operational risk of continued reconnaissance is significant, Marcus acknowledged, displaying risk assessment matrices that showed probability calculations for various failure scenarios. But the strategic risk of operating without current intelligence about adversary capabilities is catastrophic. What I've gathered represents the tip of the iceberg. There are development programs and operational preparations that we haven't even begun to understand. Dr. Harrison studied the comparative intelligence analysis with growing alarm, recognizing that Marcus's reconnaissance had revealed threats that could fundamentally alter military strategy and national defense planning. The technical specifications you've documented exceed our current understanding of aerospace engineering principles. We need continued monitoring to understand how they've achieved these capabilities and what additional developments might be in progress. Colonel Martinez looked around the room at the faces of people who would have to make recommendations that could affect the course of national security for decades to come. The decision they were contemplating would ask one man to sacrifice everything for intelligence that might be the difference between strategic surprise and strategic preparedness. But it would also mean accepting that some missions required prices that challenged fundamental assumptions about what individuals should be asked to give for their country. "Marcus, I need you to understand what you're proposing," Martinez said, her voice carrying the weight of command decisions that affected lives and operations far beyond immediate tactical concerns. "If we approve continued operations, you're accepting permanent separation from any possibility of conventional life. No family, no relationships, no identity beyond the mission. Are you certain that's a choice you're prepared to live with indefinitely?" "Ma'am, I made that choice 15 years ago when I volunteered for the original mission," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had already processed the implications of his decision through years of operational experience. The Ghost Pilot program requires complete commitment to mission success, regardless of personal cost. That commitment doesn't change based on mission duration or operational complexity. Lieutenant Colonel Park nodded slowly, recognizing that Marcus represented something unprecedented in military service, a weapon system that combined human Intelligence with technological capability in ways that exceeded anything conventional. Military doctrine had anticipated. If we approve continued operations, what kind of support structure would you need? Communication protocols, equipment resupply, emergency extraction procedures? Marcus pulled up operational support requirements that had been refined through 15 years of experience operating beyond the reach of conventional military logistics. The aircraft's advanced manufacturing capabilities allow for in-field maintenance and equipment production. Communication protocols can be maintained through encrypted satellite links that preserve operational security. Emergency extraction isn't a viable option given the operational environment, but that limitation has been acceptable for 15 years. The conversation had reached the point where theoretical planning merged with operational reality, where abstract concepts of sacrifice and service became concrete decisions that would affect human lives and national security in ways that extended far beyond the secure briefing room. Colonel Martinez realized that what they were contemplating represented a new form of military service, one that pushed the boundaries of what individuals could be asked to give for their country, while operating in the spaces between official recognition and complete abandonment. The encrypted communication system chimed with an urgent priority signal that made everyone in the briefing room freeze in recognition of what such a notification meant during a classified intelligence debriefing. Colonel Martinez activated the secure display with practiced efficiency, revealing the stern face of General Patricia Williams, whose expression carried the weight of decisions that had been made at the highest levels of government in the past. 30 minutes. Colonel Martinez, we've been monitoring your briefing through real-time intelligence feeds, General Williams said, her voice carrying an urgency that suggested the conversation had triggered immediate action at Northcom headquarters. The National Security Council has been convened for emergency session based on preliminary assessment of the intelligence your asset has provided. We need immediate escalation of this briefing to include CIA, NSA, and Defense Intelligence Agency leadership. Marcus straightened in his chair, recognizing that his intelligence had crossed the threshold from tactical information to strategic crisis management in ways that would affect decision-making at the highest levels of government. The data he'd gathered during 15 years of deep reconnaissance had finally reached the point where it demanded immediate action from people whose decisions could alter the course of international relations and military strategy. Ma'am, I'm prepared for immediate expansion of the briefing, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the professional calm of someone who had delivered critical intelligence under pressure countless times before. But I want to emphasize that what I've presented represents preliminary findings. The full scope of adversary capabilities and intentions requires continued monitoring to develop comprehensive threat assessments. Dr. Harrison activated additional secure communication protocols that would allow real-time participation from intelligence agency leadership located in facilities across the Washington area. The technology represented some of the most advanced secure communication systems available to the government, creating encrypted connections that could handle the most sensitive intelligence discussions without risk of interception or compromise. Within minutes, the briefing room's main display showed a grid of faces representing the most senior intelligence officials in the United States government, people whose daily decisions affected national security operations around the world. CIA Director Rebecca Chun, NSA Director Michael Torres, and Defense Intelligence Agency Director Sarah Park appeared on screen with expressions that mixed professional concern with personal recognition of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Agent Reeves, Director Chen said, using the cover identity that Marcus had maintained during his years of deep operation, your intelligence has been preliminarily assessed by our technical analysis teams. The implications for national security are significant enough to trigger immediate policy review at the National Security Council level. We need comprehensive briefing on your assessment of adversary intentions and operational timelines. Marcus activated his most detailed intelligence displays, showing three-dimensional holographic representations of adversary facilities, technology demonstrations, and operational activities that painted a picture of strategic preparation that exceeded anything conventional intelligence gathering had detected. The data represented the culmination of 15 years spent gathering information that was impossible to obtain through satellite surveillance or conventional human intelligence. Operations. Directors, what you're seeing represents a coordinated technological development program that began at least 2 decades ago with the specific goal of achieving decisive military superiority across all domains of warfare. Marcus began manipulating the displays to show progression timelines that revealed the scope and sophistication of adversary planning. This isn't responsive development or attempts to achieve parity with our capabilities. This is systematic pursuit of technological dominance, designed to render our current military strategy obsolete. NSA Director Torres leaned forward in his remote location, his signals intelligence background, making him focus on the communication and coordination aspects of what Marcus was describing. What's your assessment of their command and control? Systems? Are we looking at centralized development or distributed programs that might be vulnerable to different types of disruption? The command structure appears to be highly centralized with direct oversight from the highest levels of their government. Marcus replied, displaying organizational charts and communication intercepts that showed the integration between political leadership and technological development. But the actual development work is distributed across multiple facilities that appear to be designed with operational security that exceeds our own classified programs. Director Park from the Defense Intelligence Agency studied the facility. Layouts with the expression of someone whose worst fears about intelligence gaps were being confirmed by empirical evidence. The scale of infrastructure you've documented suggests resource commitment that we've completely underestimated. Our economic intelligence assessments didn't detect spending patterns consistent with programs of this magnitude. Marcus pulled up economic analysis data that he'd compiled through years of observing resource flows and infrastructure development in areas where conventional intelligence gathering was impossible. They've been extremely sophisticated about concealing the true cost and scope of these programs. Much of the development appears to be funded through civilian infrastructure projects and commercial technology development that serves dual-use purposes. CIA Director Chen examined the economic data with growing concern, recognizing that the adversary had achieved strategic deception on a scale that challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligence collection and analysis. This suggests a level of operational security and strategic planning that exceeds anything we've encountered before. How confident are you in the accuracy of your assessments? Director, I've been observing these programs directly for 15 years, Marcus replied, displaying mission logs and verification data that documented his presence at facilities and events that conventional intelligence had been unable to penetrate. The information I'm presenting has been cross-referenced through multiple sources and observation methods. The technological capabilities are real, the infrastructure is operational, and the timeline for deployment is accelerating. General Williams interrupted the intelligence discussion with command authority that refocused attention on immediate operational requirements. Based on preliminary assessment, the President has authorized acceleration of our own advanced aerospace programs to emergency priority status. We're also implementing immediate review of our strategic defense planning to account for the capabilities your reconnaissance has revealed. Dr. Harrison activated technical displays that showed comparative analysis between adversary capabilities and current American aerospace technology, revealing gaps that would require years or decades to close through conventional development processes. The technological principles they've deployed represent breakthroughs that our research teams have only theorized about. Achieving parity would require fundamental advances in materials science, propulsion technology, and aerospace engineering. Which brings us to the operational question, Director Torres said, his voice carrying the weight of decisions that would affect intelligence operations worldwide. What are your recommendations for continued intelligence gathering? The information you've provided is critical, but it also raises questions about gaps in our understanding that could affect strategic planning. Marcus looked around at the faces on the secure communication system, recognizing that what he was about to propose would commit him to a course of action that would define the remainder of his existence. Directors, I recommend immediate expansion of the Ghost pilot program to include additional assets capable of sustained deep reconnaissance. The intelligence requirements exceed what any single operative can gather, regardless of how long they remain in the field. Are you volunteering for continued operations? General Williams asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer and understood the implications of what Marcus was proposing. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied without hesitation. But I'm also recommending recruitment and training of additional Ghost pilots who can operate in different regions and focus on specific aspects of adversary development. The threat is too large and too complex for any single intelligence operation to comprehensively assess. Colonel Martinez had been listening to the discussion with growing understanding of the magnitude of what was being contemplated. The Ghost pilot program was about to expand from an experimental intelligence gathering operation into a permanent, strategic capability that would require people to disappear from the world indefinitely in service of national security. The psychological and operational challenges of expanding the program are significant, Martinez said, her voice carrying concern for the human cost of what was being discussed. We're talking about asking people to sacrifice everything, including their identities and any possibility of conventional life, for intelligence operations that might continue indefinitely. Director Chen nodded, recognizing the ethical implications of what they were contemplating, while balancing those concerns against the existential threat that Marcus's intelligence had revealed. The National Security Council is prepared to authorize whatever resources are necessary to address this threat. That includes expansion of classified programs that operate beyond conventional military structure. Marcus activated a final display that showed his assessment of optimal intelligence gathering requirements. Operational structures that would provide comprehensive monitoring of adversary activities across multiple regions and technological domains. The program I'm proposing would require 12 to 15 Ghost pilots operating in coordinated fashion across different areas of responsibility. Each operative would need to maintain deep cover for extended periods while gathering intelligence that conventional methods cannot obtain. And you're prepared to continue serving as lead operative for such an expanded program? General Williams asked, recognizing that Marcus represented irreplaceable experience and capability that would be crucial for training and coordinating additional assets. Ma'am, I've been preparing for exactly this type of expansion throughout my 15 years of operation, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had anticipated this moment and prepared for its requirements. The Ghost pilot program represents a strategic capability that our nation needs. I'm prepared to serve in whatever capacity best supports that mission. The briefing room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what had just been discussed. They were contemplating the creation of a shadow force of intelligence operatives who would disappear from official existence to gather information that could determine the outcome of strategic competition between superpowers. The human cost would be enormous, but the alternative might be facing strategic surprise that could fundamentally alter the global balance of power. The secure communication links went dark at exactly 13:47 hours, leaving the briefing room and building 47 wrapped in the kind of silence that followed decisions too large for immediate comprehension. Colonel Martinez stared at the blank screens where moments before the faces of the nation's most senior intelligence officials had been weighing choices that would reshape American military strategy for decades to come. The authorization codes that had just been transmitted carried the weight of presidential directive, approving an expansion of the Ghost pilot program that would transform it from experimental operation into permanent strategic capability. Marcus Reeves sat motionless in his chair, processing the magnitude of what had just been authorized while simultaneously calculating the operational requirements that would be necessary to implement such an ambitious intelligence-gathering network. 15 years of solitary operation had prepared him for many contingencies, but coordinating a multi-asset program that would span hostile territories across multiple continents represented challenges that exceeded even his extensive experience. In unconventional warfare, the recruitment protocols alone will be extraordinary, Dr. Harrison said, breaking the silence with observations that reflected his engineering approach to complex problems. We need pilots with exceptional skill levels who are also psychologically capable of permanent separation from conventional existence. The intersection of those qualifications represents a very small population within the military aviation community. Lieutenant Colonel Park nodded grimly, his security background making him acutely aware of the operational challenges that would accompany expanded Ghost pilot operations. The psychological evaluation process will need to be completely redesigned. We're not just looking for people who can handle stress and isolation. We need individuals who can maintain operational effectiveness while permanently severed from all conventional support structures. Marcus activated his personal data storage systems, displaying psychological profiles and assessment criteria that he'd developed through years of observing his own adaptation to conditions that no training manual could adequately prepare someone for. The selection process needs to focus on specific personality characteristics that correlate with long-term operational success in hostile environments. Traditional military psychology doesn't account for the unique stresses of permanent exile. Colonel Martinez studied Marcus's psychological framework with growing understanding of how someone could survive 15 years of complete isolation while maintaining operational effectiveness. The assessment criteria he'd developed represented insights that could only come from direct experience with conditions that would destroy most people within months of deployment. What's your assessment of the timeline for recruiting and training additional operatives? Martinez asked, recognizing that the expanded program would require operational capabilities far beyond anything the military had previously attempted. The presidential directive authorizes immediate implementation, but the practical requirements for preparing people for this type of mission are extraordinary. Based on my experience, the training program would require minimum 18 months from recruitment through operational deployment, Marcus replied, accessing training protocols that he'd refined through years of adapting to challenges that exceeded original mission parameters. But that assumes we can identify candidates who possess the baseline psychological and technical qualifications necessary for Ghost pilot operations. Dr. Harrison activated holographic displays showing the technical specifications for additional aircraft that would be required to support expanded operations, advanced stealth technology that represented the culmination of decades of classified aerospace development. The manufacturing timeline for additional aircraft presents its own challenges. We're talking about technology that exists at the absolute cutting edge of our industrial capabilities. The aircraft production can be accelerated through emergency authorization protocols, Marcus said, displaying technical data that showed manufacturing processes optimized for rapid deployment rather than conventional quality control standards. But the human element cannot be rushed. The psychological preparation for permanent Separation from conventional existence requires careful development over extended periods. Lieutenant Colonel Park leaned forward, his expression reflecting concern about operational security implications that would accompany expanded ghost pilot activities. Multiple operatives operating simultaneously in hostile territories exponentially increases the risk of exposure. We need to consider whether the intelligence value justifies the potential for compromising the entire program. Marcus pulled up operational security protocols that he'd developed through 15 years of avoiding detection while conducting reconnaissance in environments where discovery meant certain death. The security model I've developed relies on complete operational independence between assets. Each operative functions as a completely autonomous unit with no knowledge of or communication with other ghost pilots. That level of operational isolation presents its own psychological challenges, Colonel Martinez observed, recognizing that the expanded program would ask people to accept even greater levels of separation than Marcus had experienced. You've had the knowledge that you were part of a larger program, even if you couldn't communicate with your handlers. What you're describing would eliminate even that psychological connection. The psychological isolation is significant, Marcus acknowledged, displaying assessment data that showed the mental health challenges associated with complete operational independence. But it's also the only operational security model that can support multiple simultaneous deployments without creating vulnerabilities that could compromise the entire program. Dr. Harrison studied the operational independence model with the analytical approach that engineers used when evaluating complex systems with multiple potential failure points. The technical requirements for supporting completely autonomous operations are extraordinary. Each aircraft would need to be essentially self-sufficient for extended periods without any external support or resupply. The technology exists, Marcus replied, showing technical specifications for advanced manufacturing systems that could produce equipment and supplies in field conditions. The aircraft I've been operating has been upgraded with fabrication capabilities that allow for production of virtually any component or supply that might be needed during extended operations. The conversation was interrupted by an encrypted communication from General Williams, her face appearing on the secure display with an expression that carried new urgency beyond what had been discussed during the earlier briefing. Colonel Martinez, we've received additional intelligence through conventional channels that confirms the timeline pressure your asset has identified. The National Security Council has authorized immediate acceleration of recruitment and training protocols. Marcus straightened in his chair, recognizing that conventional intelligence sources had apparently detected indicators that supported his assessment of adversary operational timelines. General, what type of conventional intelligence has confirmed the threat assessment? Satellite imagery analysis has detected construction activities at facilities that correlate with locations you've identified in your reconnaissance reports. General Williams replied, displaying imagery that showed massive infrastructure development that had previously gone unnoticed. The scale of construction suggests they're preparing for operational deployment much sooner than our previous estimates indicated. Dr. Harrison examined the satellite imagery with growing alarm, recognizing construction patterns that confirmed his worst fears about adversary development timelines. The infrastructure shown here represents manufacturing capabilities that could support large-scale production of the advanced aircraft systems your reconnaissance has documented. Which means we're not just facing a research and development program anymore, Lieutenant Colonel Park said, his voice carrying the weight of threat assessments that had just shifted from future possibility to immediate crisis. We're looking at operational preparation for deployment of capabilities that could fundamentally alter the global military balance. Marcus activated comparative analysis displays that showed the correlation between his reconnaissance findings and the newly available satellite intelligence, creating a comprehensive picture of adversary activities that exceeded anything previously understood. The timeline I've been tracking through direct observation aligns with what the satellite imagery shows. They're moving from development to production to deployment much faster than our intelligence community anticipated. General Williams continued her briefing with information that made everyone in the room understand why presidential authorization had been granted so quickly. Economic intelligence sources have also detected resource flows that suggest they're preparing for major military operations within the next 12 to 18 months. The combination of technological capability and operational preparation represents an immediate threat to American strategic interests. General, what's the authorized timeline for implementing the expanded Ghost Pilot program? Colonel Martinez asked, recognizing that the conversation had moved from theoretical planning to emergency implementation of capabilities that would be crucial for national survival. The President has authorized immediate recruitment and training with operational deployment, targeted for no later than 6 months from today, General Williams replied, her words carrying the weight of decisions that would affect lives and operations across multiple continents. We're implementing emergency protocols that bypass normal military bureaucracy and security clearance procedures. Marcus processed the timeline requirements with the analytical approach that allowed him to survive 15 years of impossible missions, calculating resource requirements and operational parameters that would be necessary to meet such aggressive deployment schedules. 6 months is achievable if we focus on candidates who already possess advanced aviation qualifications and psychological profiles that suggest compatibility with extended isolation operations. What's your assessment of the candidate pool within current military aviation personnel? Dr. Harrison asked, his technical background making him focus on the practical requirements for identifying people with the necessary qualifications. Are we looking at dozens of potential candidates, hundreds, or thousands? Based on my analysis of military personnel records and psychological assessment criteria, we're probably looking at fewer than 50 candidates within the entire military aviation community who possess both the technical qualifications and psychological characteristics necessary for Ghost Pilot operations. Marcus replied, displaying selection criteria that painted a picture of extraordinarily restrictive requirements. Lieutenant Colonel Park leaned back in his chair, processing the implications of such a limited candidate pool for a program that required rapid expansion. 50 candidates for 12 to 15 operational positions doesn't provide much margin for training failures or psychological incompatibility. We need to consider backup plans if the recruitment process doesn't yield sufficient qualified personnel. The selection criteria can be modified based on operational requirements, Marcus said, showing alternative assessment frameworks that balance ideal qualifications against practical availability of candidates. But reducing standards significantly increases the risk of operational failure or psychological breakdown during extended deployment. Colonel Martinez studied the recruitment challenges with growing understanding of why the Ghost Pilot program had originally been conceived as a limited experimental operation rather than a large-scale strategic capability. We're asking people to make sacrifices that exceed anything in military history while operating in conditions that no training can fully prepare them for. The human cost of what we're implementing is extraordinary. The human cost is significant. General Williams acknowledged through the secure communication link, her voice carrying recognition of the ethical implications of what was being authorized. But the alternative cost of facing strategic surprise with inferior intelligence could be measured in terms of national survival. The President has determined that the Ghost Pilot program represents our best option for maintaining strategic awareness of adversary capabilities. Marcus activated final displays showing operational deployment scenarios that would provide comprehensive intelligence coverage of adversary activities while maintaining operational security protocols that could protect individual assets from exposure. The program I'm recommending would establish Intelligence gathering capabilities that exceed anything conventional military operations could achieve. But it requires complete commitment from operatives who understand they're accepting permanent separation from conventional existence. The briefing room fell silent once again as everyone processed the magnitude of what was being implemented. They were creating a shadow force of intelligence operatives who would disappear from official existence to gather information that could determine whether America maintained strategic competitiveness in an era of unprecedented technological warfare. The Ghost Pilot program was about to transform from experimental operation into permanent strategic necessity, requiring sacrifices that challenged fundamental assumptions about what individuals could be asked to give for their country. 6 months after the emergency authorization, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the identical briefing room where Marcus Reeves had delivered intelligence that transformed American military strategy. But her circumstances represented both triumph and tragedy in equal measure. She had been one of only 12 candidates who successfully completed the accelerated Ghost Pilot training program, a psychological and technical ordeal that had broken 23 other highly qualified military aviators before they reached operational deployment status. The woman who entered that room was no longer the person who had volunteered for the program, and the person she had become would never again exist in the conventional world. The training facility hidden beneath the Nevada desert had become a factory for producing operatives who could function in conditions that exceeded human endurance, while maintaining technical precision that could mean the difference between successful intelligence gathering and international catastrophe. Elena had spent the past 6 months learning to fly aircraft that officially didn't exist, mastering survival techniques for environments where rescue was impossible, and undergoing psychological conditioning that prepared her for permanent separation from everything that had previously defined her existence. Marcus Reeves observed the final briefing session with the detached professionalism of someone who had become the template for a new form of military service, his presence serving as both inspiration and warning for operatives who were about to follow his path into permanent exile. The 12 Ghost pilots who had survived the selection and training process represented the culmination of emergency recruitment protocols that had identified and developed capabilities far beyond anything conventional military doctrine had anticipated. Your deployment zones have been selected based on intelligence requirements that cannot be satisfied through conventional reconnaissance methods, Colonel Martinez explained, activating holographic displays that showed global operational areas where each Ghost pilot would conduct independent intelligence gathering missions. Each of you will operate completely autonomously with no communication between assets and minimal contact with home base, except for emergency protocols. Elena studied her assigned operational area with the analytical precision that had made her one of the most accomplished test pilots in the Air Force before she volunteered to disappear from official existence. The region encompassed territories where adversary technological development had accelerated beyond anything conventional intelligence could monitor, places where the kind of direct observation that Marcus had pioneered was essential for understanding threats that could fundamentally alter global military balance. Dr. Harrison presented technical briefings on the aircraft systems that would support extended operations in hostile territory, advanced stealth technology that represented the absolute pinnacle of American aerospace engineering, combined with manufacturing capabilities that could sustain operatives for years without external support. Your aircraft incorporate lessons learned from 15 years of Ghost pilot operations, with improved stealth characteristics, extended range capabilities, and enhanced survival systems. The psychological support systems have also been significantly upgraded based on assessment of long-term operational stress factors, added Dr. Sarah Kim, the military psychologist who had developed new protocols for preparing operatives for permanent separation from conventional social structures. Your aircraft include advanced communication and entertainment systems designed to combat the isolation effects that represent the primary threat to operational effectiveness during extended deployment. Elena nodded, though she understood that no technological solution could fully address the psychological challenges of permanent exile from human connection. The training program had included extensive simulation of isolation conditions, but every graduate understood that actual deployment would test their mental resilience in ways that no preparation could completely anticipate. Lieutenant Commander David Park, brother of the security officer who had been present during Marcus's return, presented operational security protocols that had been refined through analysis of 15 years of successful ghost pilot operations. Your operational security depends on complete disconnection from your previous identity and total commitment to maintaining cover identities that have been developed to support extended presence in hostile territory. The operational security briefing included documentation of the elaborate false identities that had been created for each ghost pilot, complete biographical histories that could withstand extensive investigation by adversary intelligence services. Elena reviewed her new identity with the strange sensation of reading about someone else's life, while simultaneously understanding that this fictional person would become more real than the Air Force captain who had volunteered for the program. Marcus stepped forward to deliver the final operational briefing, his presence carrying the authority of someone whose experience had become the foundation for an entire strategic program. The intelligence you gather will determine whether America maintains technological competitiveness in warfare domains that will define global power relationships for decades to come. Your sacrifice makes possible strategic awareness that no other intelligence gathering method can provide. What happens if we want to come home? Asked Captain James Rodriguez, one of the 12 ghost pilots whose question carried the weight of concerns that every operative had considered during the months of preparation. The training emphasized permanent deployment, but what if operational conditions change or family emergencies require extraction? Marcus looked at Rodriguez with eyes that reflected 15 years of grappling with identical questions, his expression carrying both understanding and the hard reality of choices that couldn't be unmade. Captain, the moment you deploy Elena Vasquez ceases to exist in official records. Your family will be notified that you died in a training accident. There is no extraction protocol because there is no official mission to extract you from. The briefing room fell silent as the 12 operatives processed the finality of what they were accepting, the understanding that they were choosing to die to their previous lives in order to serve in ways that would never be officially acknowledged. Elena felt the weight of that decision settling into her consciousness like a physical presence, the recognition that everything she had been was about to become memory. Dr. Kim addressed the psychological implications with clinical precision that somehow made the enormity of their sacrifice seem manageable through technical analysis. The grief process for your former identity is normal and expected. The psychological preparation you've received provides coping mechanisms for managing that transition while maintaining operational effectiveness. Your families have been prepared through carefully managed notification protocols, Colonel Martinez added, her voice carrying sympathy for both the operatives and the loved ones who would believe them dead. Military casualty assistance officers will provide support consistent with death notifications, including memorial services and survivor benefits. Elena thought about her parents, her younger sister, and the fiancé who had planned to marry. An Air Force captain who would never return from what he believed was a routine training deployment. The psychological training had prepared her for this moment, but the reality of permanent separation from everyone she loved felt like a physical amputation of her emotional connections to the world. Marcus activated displays showing the global operational network that the expanded Ghost Pilot program would create, 12 independent intelligence gathering operations that would provide comprehensive monitoring of adversary activities across multiple continents. Each of you represents a strategic asset whose intelligence gathering capabilities exceed anything conventional military operations can achieve. Your deployment creates an intelligence network that will be crucial for national survival. The technological intelligence you gather will inform American aerospace development programs that must accelerate to maintain strategic competitiveness. Dr. Harrison explained, showing comparative analysis between known adversary capabilities and current American technology. Your reconnaissance will guide research and development priorities that could determine the outcome of technological competition between superpowers. Captain Lisa Chun, a former Navy test pilot whose psychological profile had indicated exceptional resilience under stress, asked the question that reflected strategic concerns beyond personal sacrifice. What happens if the program is discovered? What happens if adversary intelligence services identify ghost pilot operations and begin actively hunting us? Discovery is an accepted operational risk that has been factored into program planning. Lieutenant Commander Park replied, displaying threat assessment matrices that showed probability calculations for various exposure scenarios. Each operative has been prepared for capture and interrogation protocols that protect both individual operatives and overall program security. Marcus supplemented the security briefing with insights gained through 15 years of avoiding detection. While operating in territories where discovery meant certain death, the operational security protocols you've learned represent the evolution of techniques that have proven successful under actual combat conditions. Your survival depends on maintaining absolute discipline in implementing those protocols. Alina studied the capture and interrogation protocols with the recognition that they represented preparation for scenarios where death might be preferable to the intelligence compromise that could result from breaking under pressure. The psychological conditioning had included resistance training that exceeded anything conventional military personnel received, but she understood that no preparation could guarantee success against adversary interrogation techniques. The deployment timeline begins tomorrow with sequential insertion over the next 72 hours, Colonel Martinez announced, her words marking the transition from preparation to operational reality. Each operative will deploy independently, using cover identities and infiltration methods that have been customized for specific operational environments. Dr. Kim activated final psychological assessment protocols that would evaluate each operative's readiness for deployment while simultaneously providing last opportunity counseling for anyone who recognized they weren't prepared for permanent separation from conventional existence. This is your final opportunity to reconsider your commitment to the program. Once deployment begins, there's no opportunity for reconsideration or extraction. Elena looked around the briefing room at the 11 other operatives who had survived. The selection and training process, recognizing in their faces the same mixture of determination and apprehension that she felt about the mission they were about to undertake. They represented the best of American military aviation, people who had volunteered to disappear from the world in order to serve their country in ways that would never be officially acknowledged. Marcus delivered his final words to the operatives with the authority of someone whose experience had become legendary within the classified community. You are about to become ghosts in the truest sense, people who exist in the spaces between official records, whose actions will influence events that shape global history. The sacrifice you're making exceeds anything in military tradition, but the capability you're providing is essential for national survival. The briefing concluded with individual meetings between each operative and their handlers, final coordination sessions that would establish communication protocols and emergency procedures that might determine whether the expanded Ghost pilot program succeeded or failed catastrophically. Elena prepared for her individual briefing with the understanding that the next conversation she had with Colonel Martinez might be the last time she spoke with anyone who knew her real name. The transformation from Captain Elena Vasquez to Ghost pilot was complete, and the woman who would deploy the next morning carried intelligence-gathering capabilities that represented America's best hope for maintaining strategic awareness in an era of unprecedented technological warfare. The Ghost Pilot program had evolved from experimental operation to strategic necessity, requiring sacrifices that challenged fundamental assumptions about what individuals could be asked to give for their country while operating in conditions that exceeded human endurance. 2 years after the deployment of the expanded Ghost Pilot program, the secure conference room in Building 47 hosted a briefing that would redefine American understanding of global military capabilities and strategic threats. Colonel Martinez sat across from General Williams and a collection of intelligence officials, whose faces reflected the weight of information that had arrived through channels so classified that most government personnel would never know of their existence. The holographic displays showed intelligence gathered by 12 operatives who had disappeared into hostile territories and emerged as the most valuable strategic assets in American military history. Marcus Reeves appeared on the secure communication link from a location that couldn't be identified through conventional means, his presence serving as confirmation that the Ghost Pilot program had not only survived, but evolved into something far more significant than its original architects had envisioned. Behind him, barely visible in the shadows of his transmission, stood Alina Vasquez and 3 other Ghost pilots whose operational successes had exceeded every projection made during the program's emergency expansion. The intelligence network we've established provides real-time monitoring of adversary technological development across 17 different facilities in 8 countries, Marcus reported, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had become the coordinator of operations that spanned multiple continents. What we've discovered changes everything about how we understand global military competition and the timeline for technological warfare. Dr. Harrison activated displays showing comparative analysis between adversary capabilities documented by Ghost Pilot reconnaissance and the most advanced technology in American development programs, revealing gaps that would have been impossible to detect through conventional intelligence gathering. Their technological advancement has accelerated beyond our most pessimistic projections. They're not just achieving parity with our capabilities anymore. They're establishing technological dominance across multiple warfare domains. Elena stepped forward in the shadowy transmission, her presence representing the successive recruitment and training protocols that had transformed exceptional military aviators into intelligence operatives capable of sustained operations in conditions that exceeded human endurance. The manufacturing capabilities we've documented indicate they're preparing for large-scale production of advanced weapon systems. This isn't research and development anymore. This is preparation for operational deployment. General Williams leaned forward, recognizing that the intelligence being presented represented strategic warning of threats that could fundamentally alter the global balance of power. What's your assessment of their timeline for achieving operational deployment of these capabilities? Are we looking at months, years, or decades before they can field these systems in significant numbers? Ma'am, based on our direct observation of production facilities and testing operations, they could achieve initial operational capability within 6 to 12 months. Marcus replied, displaying manufacturing data that painted a picture of industrial preparation that exceeded anything conventional intelligence had detected. Full-scale deployment could follow within 18 to 24 months. Dr. Kim, who had developed the psychological protocols that allowed Ghost pilots to maintain operational effectiveness during extended isolation, appeared on a secondary communication link to provide assessment of the human cost of the expanded program. The psychological toll on our operatives has been significant but manageable. We've developed support systems that allow them to maintain mission effectiveness while coping with permanent separation from conventional social structures. Lieutenant Commander Park presented operational security analysis that showed how the Ghost Pilot Network had avoided detection while gathering intelligence that conventional methods couldn't obtain. Our operatives have achieved complete infiltration of adversary development programs without triggering security responses that would indicate awareness of our intelligence gathering activities. The operational security protocols developed through 15 years of Ghost Pilot operations have proven effective across multiple operational environments. Elena activated technical displays showing weapon systems that exceeded American understanding of aerospace engineering principles, aircraft capable of performance characteristics that seem to violate known laws of physics. The propulsion technology they've developed allows for flight profiles that render conventional defensive systems obsolete. Our current air defense networks wouldn't be capable of engaging targets with these performance capabilities. Colonel Martinez studied the technical specifications with growing alarm, recognizing that American military strategy was based on assumptions about technological superiority that had been completely invalidated by Ghost Pilot intelligence. This represents an existential threat to national security that requires immediate response at the highest levels of government. We need to brief the National Security Council on threat assessments that could require fundamental changes to military doctrine and defense planning. Marcus pulled up strategic assessment matrices that showed the correlation between adversary technological capabilities and potential operational scenarios that could reshape global military relationships within months. The capabilities we've documented would allow them to neutralize American force projection capabilities while establishing air and space dominance that could be decisive in any military conflict. What are your recommendations for American response to these threat assessments? General Williams asked, recognizing that the conversation had moved beyond intelligence gathering into crisis management that would require decisions at the presidential level. Do we have options for disrupting their development programs or neutralizing their operational capabilities before they achieve full deployment? Elena exchanged glances with Marcus through the secure communication link, their expression reflect in operational experience that had revealed possibilities beyond conventional military planning. We've identified vulnerabilities in their development infrastructure that could be exploited through targeted operations. But such operations would require resources and authorization that exceed current Ghost Pilot capabilities. Dr. Harrison activated displays showing American aerospace development programs that could be accelerated to respond to the documented threat. But the timeline analysis revealed gaps that couldn't be closed through conventional research and development processes. Achieving technological parity would require breakthrough discoveries that our current research programs haven't achieved after decades of development. We need alternative approaches to maintaining strategic competitiveness. The Ghost Pilot program has evolved beyond intelligence gathering into operational capabilities that could support direct action missions, Marcus said, displaying mission parameters that showed how stealth technology and operational experience could be combined to conduct operations that conventional military forces couldn't execute. Our operatives have developed expertise in infiltration and sabotage that could be applied to disrupting adversary development programs. Lieutenant Commander Park presented operational security analysis for direct action missions that would transform Ghost Pilots from observers into active participants in technological warfare. The operational risk of direct action missions is significant, but the strategic benefit of disrupting adversary development could be decisive in maintaining American technological competitiveness. General Williams processed the implications of what was being proposed, recognizing that the Ghost Pilot program was about to evolve from intelligence gathering into active warfare conducted by operatives who officially didn't exist. The authorization for direct action missions would require presidential approval and congressional notification through the most classified briefing procedures. We're talking about warfare conducted through channels that operate beyond conventional military command structure. Elena stepped forward again, her presence representing 12 operatives who had already sacrificed everything for national security and were prepared to risk even more for missions that could determine the outcome of technological competition between superpowers. Ma'am, we've been preparing for this possibility throughout our operational deployment. The intelligence we've gathered has revealed targets and vulnerabilities that could be exploited to disrupt their development timeline. Significantly, Colonel Martinez looked around the briefing room at the faces of people who were contemplating operations that would push the boundaries of international law and military ethics while operating in the spaces between official acknowledgement and complete deniability. The implications of what we're discussing extend far beyond military operations. We're talking about warfare conducted by people who don't officially exist against programs that aren't officially acknowledged. Marcus activated final displays showing operational scenarios that could disrupt adversary technological development while maintaining operational security that protected both individual operatives and the overall Ghost pilot program. The missions we're proposing would require coordination between multiple Ghost pilots operating simultaneously across different targets. The complexity exceeds anything we've attempted before. But the alternative is facing technological obsolescence that could make American military power irrelevant in future conflicts. Dr. Harrison added, his engineering background making him focus on the technical implications of allowing adversary technological superiority to continue unchallenged. The Ghost pilot program represents our best option for maintaining strategic competitiveness through direct action rather than reactive development. The briefing concluded with authorization procedures that would elevate the Ghost pilot program from intelligence gathering to active warfare, transforming operatives who had disappeared from official existence into weapons capable of conducting operations that could influence the course of global military competition. The Ghosts who had volunteered to die to their previous lives were about to become the guardians of American technological supremacy, operating in shadows where heroes were made and forgotten in equal measure. General Williams terminated the secure communication link with words that carried the weight of decisions that would affect national security for decades. I'm recommending immediate presidential authorization for Ghost pilot direct action operations. The threat assessment you've provided requires response that exceeds conventional military capabilities. The room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of what had just been authorized. The Ghost pilot program had evolved from experimental intelligence operation into America's most classified weapon system, operated by people who had sacrificed everything to serve their country in ways that would never be officially acknowledged. The future of technological warfare would be determined by Ghosts who flew aircraft that didn't officially exist, conducting missions that would never appear in any historical record. What do you think happened to those brave pilots who gave up everything for their country? Did they succeed in their impossible missions? The truth about America's most classified operations remains hidden in the shadows, protected by people whose sacrifices we'll never fully know. If stories like this fascinate you, tales of hidden heroes and classified operations that shape our world from the shadows, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of viewers who want to explore the extraordinary stories that exist between the lines of official history. What other secrets do you think are being kept to protect national security? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations into the stories they don't want you to know.